Three.
Hi, Silver Creek. We are here with Jason Lathrop, another one of your esteemed colleagues, and I've asked him to talk about goal setting in the classroom with the students, especially in writing. So I will let Jason explain his process.
So one of the things Karen wanted me to talk about is a process I've been using for several years in my classroom and modifying, which is giving students personalized feedback on their papers. And so I have examples of the way the process typically works in the classroom. I will give students class silent reading time, and during that reading time, I'll conference with the individual students on one of their papers. So this is an example of what one of the papers might look like that I'd hand back to a kid. This belongs to one of the kids I have in ninth grade right now. And I put comments on the paper like everybody else does, but I put check marks or smiley faces, and they correspond to two categories of comments. The check marks are things that we want the student to work on a future paper. Things like work toward less mechanical linking transitions between paragraphs, for instance. So you can see here we got this middle school habit of doing first, next, and in conclusion. So that's an area for a kid to work on this year. Now, obviously, they're not going to get all of these things done. So one of the things I'll do when I meet with them is I'll put an asterisk by the ones that I think are most important for their growth as a writer. In this case, we said save space after the quotation in the explanation of significance to link evidence and argument. And so that's an area that's really important for this kid's growth and more important than some of the other things I've put on here, so we'll kind of categorize them. I learned years ago when I would ask kids how come they never remembered what I told them about writing, that because they would tell me that it was because they just forgot, that they weren't trying to disrespect me, they weren't trying to disrespect the process or my intent or anything, they just forgot. So as I thought about that, I figured out that maybe one of the best ways to put the responsibility back on the kid is to have them type up these comments. So you'll see the check marks from my comments become check marks they type up on their personalized checklist. And the smiley faces down here become things that they transfer over there. The smiley faces are things they're doing well in their writing we want to continue. What I discovered from feedback from students is that they felt like this mattered an awful lot to them. And because we're talking about ways to make assignments feel relevant to the students, one, they're getting the personalized feedback, and I don't just hand the paper back, but I go over it with them. But the most important part of it, I think, for relevance is that we have a plan for their growth going forward. That I'm not just giving them comments and saying, this is your grade. I'm saying, here's where you are, snapshot right now, and what can we do next time to make your paper even better than this one was. You can see this is a version of a kid's checklist after a couple of conferences. And you'll see there's a category here that says things I have worked on. So some of the things we've conferenced on, we look at their checklist and say, hey, you've made good progress here. Let's just move this to the reminder category. I've also add later on some of their best lines. And either I or one of their classmates will mark down some of the lines when we conference that we think were particularly impactful, that line that you read and you say, wow, I really like the way that they wrote that. So what we do is in the process, after I conference with them, they'll update their checklist after each round of conferences. And when we write the next paper, they will then have this in front of them, and I make them turn these into me before we start the next paper so that I know that I've jogged their memory and forced them to look again at the stuff that they're working on so that they have a plan for making progress. When students, my experience has been that when students feel like they are making progress and they can see that progress in the conferences and they can track it using the check sheet, then they feel like what we're doing is a lot more significant and important to them. The last thing I have here is another strategy connected to that. It's the same checklist strategy, but I will sometimes pair students, especially when we're doing an aspect of writing for the first time. So if we're talking about really digging in on the explanation of significance, for instance, I pair kids up, and that way they're looking at the notes they took about how to do that and the things we talked about in class. They're talking to one another. They're answering one another's questions. They're making the product much better before I ever see it because of that conversation between the two of them. It's no longer this private paper that they're doing at 12 o'clock at night and turning in. It's something that they're responsible for because they have a partner. And then when I conference with both of them, the same kind of conferences that I did before. This strategy takes significant time, for sure. It takes time to put the comments on the paper. It takes class time to conference with the kids. But year after year, teenagers will tell me that they feel like this process has made them better writers and helped them grow as writers. And if they really feel like it's that useful to their personal growth, it seems to me that that is going to make what we're doing in class regarding writing a lot more relevant to them and feel like something that they want to engage in with lots of energy.
Do you feel that this goal-setting process involves the students more than it would otherwise?
Absolutely. In fact, in the later conferences, what we'll do is I don't even show the students their scores. And so, for instance, when I did this round of conferences, I gave them their comments, and I didn't give them their scores until later on. And I asked them, what is the area that you feel most confident about here and proudest of, and what's the area that you wish you had done better, you had misgivings about it when you turned the paper in? Because the kids have to articulate that to me instead of me just always telling them what I think about the paper, I think that makes them feel like it's a lot more meaningful, the process they're going through.
So you have, like, this is what they need to work on. You
Mhm.
kind of collectively come together for that decision, what they need to work on.
Mhm.
The discussion of how,
Mhm.
and then why it would be important for them to make those improvements. So do you think that this connects them more to your class, to learning, to their own learning?
I remember getting papers back in college even, and papers I may have done really well on, but there were no comments, or there were just marginal generic comments, and I felt cheated a little bit. I felt like there was a grade on it, and I was glad that I had done well on it, perhaps, but I didn't feel like anybody had really read it. And I think sometimes if kids feel like you've really read their paper to the point that you can laugh about some line that they had in there specifically, then they feel like you've really taken the time to read it. And because you've taken the time to read it and you care that much about it, I think they tend to care a little bit more about it too.
Thank you.